I'm reviewing and ranking every single club crest in this season's Premier League, because even if you don't care about football, there's a lot to learn about identity design from these 20 emblems. A club's badge is incredibly important to its fans. They may even have it tattooed on their body, so the stakes are high. And because what's best can often be a matter of taste, I'm rating each crest according to the following criteria, based on my experience as a designer and art director. Firstly, appropriate. Does this match the feeling that we want to evoke? Nextly, distinctive. Does it stand out amongst its competitors and identify this team? Nextly, creative. And that doesn't mean bringing in lots of different ideas, but a central creative idea, creative decisions that have been made that make sense. Then it wants to be well crafted, so we're talking about the technical design considerations here of typography, illustration, balance. Does it scale well? Looking at the composition of the marks. And finally, timeless. These things want to last for decades, so we don't want something that's going to date quickly. I'm going to give a mark out of 20 for each one of these, and that will give us a percentage rating for every single crest. So let's look at these 20. They can fall broadly into 5 categories, and I'm going to take them category by category so we can compare them well. Firstly, the roundels, round badges, and we're going to start with what I think is the newest design crest in the Premier League, Brentford from London, that was released in 2017. And here we have a roundel with this red ring around the edge, this central illustrated bee, and the year of formation. And I'm going to just spend a little bit longer on this first one so we can look at some of the criteria for evaluating these things. There's actually a really great article on Brentford's website about the launch of the new crest, and they had to sell this to fans, and they've explained some of the issues with the current crest, like legibility. That means whether it's easy to read. So having this black type over red and white stripes didn't really work. There was problems here. Everything looks kind of squeezed in. Then there was technical problems like different size fonts, and there was just a lack of cohesion here. This really doesn't look contemporary or professional or give them a solid identity. And what they've replaced it with is something really, really strong. The technical issues all work. There's appropriate spacing. The composition here is just very well done. And the B has that more aggressive kind of look, so it feels appropriate and right for a sports team. And I would say they want it to be more distinctive, but the problem is just with a B, there's other teams that have Bs on their crests, like Burnley, and there's other teams that have the Bs as a nickname, or Watford, which is not too far away, just north of them, and nicknamed the Hornets, even though they have a heart, a stag on their crest, but they have the yellow and black, and they have red as an accent. So I'm not sure if they can fully get away with the distinctiveness by just having that single item. Creativity, I think definitely they've gone with that central creative idea and let that shine through and got rid of all the extraneous elements that were on the last crest and just really simplified it. It doesn't need to say the word founded next to the year, just put the year on and people understand from the context of these things what that means. It's definitely well crafted. You'd expect that being one of the newest badges, but as we talked about, they've just really paid attention here to the type, to the way everything is spaced out, the space for everything so that it scales well, and the B is well drawn, and just a little bit of interest, like with the wings coming out from that central circle across onto the red ring. Just those little things give it a sense of depth and interest, and make sure the B is still visible there at a smaller scale. And I think they've done something, because of the restraint they've shown, that will stand up to the test of time. So very high rating for this first one of 78%. Let's whiz through a few more. Number 2 is Brighton and Hove Albion, and this was redesigned in 2011. And we have here a seagull, which is their nickname. For those that don't know, this is on the south coast of England, so the seagulls flying around stealing your chips. And that is presented on a simple blue field, and they play in blue and white and the blue sky there, and it all kind of works, but it's very, very simple design. Now this replaced this previous crest that was an iterated version that came about in the year 2000, and you can see why they've changed it. This is a really rudimentary drawing of the seagull. We've got two different fonts going on, from the club name to the nickname. Having the nickname in large on a badge is not really a done thing, and you don't really need it to say seagulls when you can see a visual seagull. So that's a double reading, another thing you want to avoid in identities. And you can definitely see the improvements that have come here to this design, but I would just say they could have done more with it. That's where I've maybe taken points off. I think with the typography, there's nothing that they've technically done wrong, but this is just a font, and they could have used a hand lettering designer or a type designer to really craft something unique here that had a lot more personality to it. And I feel that's a missed opportunity, and it just feels a little bit flat and not enough visual interest in here. So that's what kind of lets this one down. The next roundel is Chelsea Football Club in West London, and this lion holding a staff, this comes from Westminster, which is the council and the area that they're from, and that is an emblem that's on a lot of football badges, even national badges. Like England have the three lions, the Netherlands have a lion, there's many others, and it's not a particularly distinctive thing, is it, by itself? And there's some technical problems with it. So I really don't like the type. We've got this humanist sans serif where we've got this difference between the thicks and thins, and it just looks odd and dated. I mean, look at the apex of the capital A's, the top point of them, and they really stand out because that goes above the capi of the other letters, and even at a small size, I looked at it on their website, it looks really odd. And there's just something about this which those things I've mentioned are just meaning it's lacking a little bit. So this is only scoring 56%. Leicester City come next, and this presents the fox. Their club nickname is the Foxes, on this flower which is from the coat of arms of Leicester, and it's a very original looking flower petal design, so there's definitely something in that. But all these little details and the general style of these brushes, they're all different all the way around the flower. It's a little bit too much detail, and this sort of illustration style looks a little bit dated now. They should have gone, or there is scope for them to go, I think, more towards an iconic, a modern, a cleaner design like we saw with Brentford. And again, the type, this is something that is dated very quickly with these sort of quirky serifs on this chunky all caps type. It really looks out of date. So only 7 out of 20 for timeless, 50% for Leicester. Next up is Manchester City, who've won 4 out of the last 5 Premier Leagues, I think. And this badge was released in 2016. And what we have in the centre is this shield is taken from the city of Manchester, the place, coat of arms, with the ship representing the ship canal, the lines underneath represent 3 rivers, and then we have the red rose of Lancashire, the historic county. And this central part of the badge also appears on Manchester United's badge, as we will see later. Now, there's some odd things about it though. The shield within a roundel. This is kind of a weird, uneasy combination. It's like they decided in advance, we just want to have a roundel, but the fact that the shield is a central part of the city's coat of arms, they've just pulled these things together. And it's worth remembering that most of these crests, in fact most of the football teams, actually just originally reproduced the crest of the town or city on their shirt, and that served as the club crest. And it was only later a lot of clubs in the 50s, 60s, even into 70s and 80s then updated and changed that city or town crest to something more specific. So with Manchester City, they returned to actually an earlier design with this roundel, and I think the fans like that it harks that tradition. But I think this roundel's often chosen because they want that homogeneity across the group. So the City Football Group have teams all over the world, their owners, and they've tried to make all these badges kind of look alike and like they belong in a family, this sort of a group of companies. And I'm not sure fans that like that sort of corporate edge to it. But this is definitely something that's appropriate because it's the city of Manchester, the place where they're located, comes through, and the club colours of the sky blue shirts. It's not particularly distinctive because of just the general roundel shape and the layout, which is the same as Brentford, which, did come after this, but, Leicester and the rest with the year of formation and the club name on. I think with creativity, they could have brought a central idea better through rather than just borrowing the City coat of arms into this roundel. And I don't like the shield within a roundel. It just clashes. But overall, it's well crafted, it's well drawn, as you would expect from a club with a lot of funds behind them, and I think this will serve them well, and it was certainly better than the last badge. Next we come on to the shields, and the shield is a traditional shape because, as I've mentioned, a lot of these come from coats of arms and that sort of tradition of heraldry within European design. And so here are 6 shields, the most popular shape in the Premier League. Firstly, we're going to look at AFC Bournemouth, and this is a really unique one. I mean, this stylized heading of a football, it looks incredibly 80s. I think it was 70s, 80s when this came through, and it's distinctive and unique in that way that it doesn't look like other badges. But is it distinctive enough to be Bournemouth and nothing else? I'm not sure about that. Imagine you take away the type of Bournemouth and you take away the red and black club colours. This could just be any football club, really. So it loses some points for that. I think really this could do with an update. This sort of retro 80s style could be done but crafted a lot better. And these gradients like the gold type and the red gradient that's in the background are just looking a little bit dated to me. And I don't like that typeface. These rounded corners on the type, they really don't give that sense of strength that you want in a sports team's mark. So overall, I've got to give it some marks for creativity because it's so different, but I don't think it's different in a way that makes it distinctive because it could be any football team. 57% for Bournemouth. The next shield is Arsenal, another one of the big boys. This was released in 2002, and the original name of the team was Woolwich Arsenal, and Woolwich, a part of London where there was a barracks, an armoury in Arsenal, so they were named after that, and that's why the cannon appears on their name and they have the nickname the Gunners. Now, this is kind of the badge I remember. They had various iterations of this badge for a long time, from the 1940s right through into the 21st century, and you can see why they've moved away from the little bits of detail here, things that are not going to scale very well or be reproduced as well digitally. But I think it's just that little bit too dated. I think this is already looking a bit old-fashioned, and it's got this sort of bulge to it, and although in general it's well drawn, I just don't like this sort of bulging center 3D type effect, and I feel they could have finessed some of the elements more to improve it. But overall, you can see how this would work very well in a contemporary space. It worked well digitally, scaled down very small, and we can see that team name and that symbol still very clearly. The next one is Aston Villa, and this was redesigned recently in 2016, and This was to bring back the claws to the lion and just improve a few of the proportions. And this was drawn beautifully by Christopher Wormel, an English illustrator, and this was his illustration that was created and used throughout some of the other branding elements. And this is a very skilled drawing. You can see his illustration skills on display, and they've used this version as well as the solid version that we see on the badge, and they wanted to give that lion more aggression, bring its claws back, and they've improved the overall proportions of the mark. I just think I just would take some points off the craft, because I'm just not sure about the way these colours work. I know claret and blue are the club colours, but yellow is very dominant in there, and I know lions are yellow, but maybe it's the yellow on the blue field. There's not enough contrast. What would that look like on a claret field, perhaps? I understand that they want the star there. They're very proud of their European Cup win. But I think, again, even the shape of the star looks very default in a vector graphics program. They could have brought some more love to that and thought about how to integrate it a little bit better. But overall, this is something that is definitely says Aston Villa. Although a lot of people have the lion rampant, as we talked about with Chelsea, Aston Villa are one of the oldest football teams in the world. They've had this for a long time, and just keeping the simplicity of that, the initials, which are unique. There's only one Villa in a world full of Uniteds and cities, and the combination of these elements and the discipline to say we're just going to have the initials, the star and the lion in this shield shape, I think shows great restraint. So overall, a really, really good mark that does what a football badge should do. Next up, from the sublime to the ridiculous, we have Fulham Football Club, and this edition came out in 2001, and obviously this is a monogram where we have multiple letter forms combined into one symbol. That's what a monogram is. But can you really read this? I think I said Fulham Football Club, but it's not immediately legible. It's not visible there at a glance, and it just creates this sort of odd shape. Now, this has got to be the strangest shield that I've ever seen, so I had to throw it in there. 1931, I believe. This really odd cottage that looks like it's falling down. Now, for those that don't know, there's actually a cottage built in to Fulham's stadium, which is pretty crazy, and it's a great, unique thing that they have, a cool little quirk about that ground. But I just had to show you this thing. Who thought this idea of a cottage that looks like it needs rebuilding was a great idea for a football badge? I'm not sure. But back to this mark. Is it appropriate? Yeah, it's a shield. It's simple, but it's not distinctive enough because there's not enough interest there. I just think the idea behind this is just lazy, and I do not think it's well crafted at all. The type, even the C, is not particularly handsome, and the combination of them together, and although it's simple, you'd think it'd be timeless, but I think this is already starting to look dated. It needs a complete rethink. 42%. Leeds United. So this came about in 1998, but they did a slightly different tweak in 2002, and I think Leeds are one of those teams that have always struggled to really have a crest that they own. I mean, what is the classic Leeds crest for any Leeds fans or football fans watching? Hard to know. So let's describe what we have here. We have a football that's set in the centre of the White Rose of Yorkshire, the county where Leeds are based. We have the club colours on this shield, and then the initials of the club set in this script font. And I think this is a particular odd choice. Now, they proposed to change this in 2018 with something which just looks so different and so distinctive from all the other badges we have here, and this is to do with a song and a chant that they have at Leeds. So they thought it'd be something that would be distinctive to them, but this was hated by the fans and quickly voted down and they reverted back to what they had. It's appropriate in the sense that it's a shield, there's a football on it, there's the flower of the county, it's the club colours. But because it's such a mess, I don't think there's enough about it that's distinctive to them. A football could be for anybody. The flower in white, it's not enough. The creativity is lacking. There's just a few elements lazily put together and it is not well crafted. I do not like this old script typeface. And if you were going to have this kind of lettering, it's not particularly elegant. The curves could be refined and the way the strokes are done, but also, why would you have it stacked vertically like that? That's not how this kind of thing is presented, and it doesn't marry with the sharp angles of this chunky shield shape and the diagonal lines. And then we've got another style for the football and another style for the flower. It's all a mess together, so it definitely would benefit from some craft, and this type in particular is looking dated. Overall, a poor mark. Next, we have West Ham United from London. They're telling you that on their badge, which seems a very strange choice. This came about in 2016 when they moved into the Olympic Stadium, and they wanted to have a new brand and they wanted to launch themselves to a new level as they moved into this huge modern landmark. And I think London is there because they want to reach those Premier League fans which are all over the world. It's the most popular sports league in the world, and it just looks really fake, really touristy. Adding the word London on there has not impressed anybody in England, and it's ended up that you've then got 3 point sizes because United is smaller than West Ham. Everything looks crammed together, and this is a problem. Now, their nickname is the Hammers, and these are inscribed with the initials of Thames Ironworks, close to where the club was founded. And so I think that is a strong point about it. So I would say it's appropriate in the sense of the club colours, the club nickname, the Hammers, the crossed hammers is a distinctive thing, and it's a very simple symbol that reads quickly. So they get marks for that, for appropriate, distinctive, creative in the sense that they've brought across one strong idea. But the design decisions to use this typeface to lose a lot of the other elements and not really let this central thing sing. I don't know why it needs to sit on a shield. It just ruins the proportion. This whole thing needs a rethink, and that's why it's only getting 55%. Next, we go to shields with banners, and we have a few of the biggest clubs in here too in this category. And first up, Everton Football Club, and this was redesigned in 2014. And this, you might be wondering, what is this little tower in the centre? Well, this is Everton Lockup at Prince Rupert's Tower, I believe it's known as. And here's a photograph of the actual thing. Not incredibly impressive. This old village lockup in Liverpool, really odd feature of the local area. So that, I guess, doesn't make it distinctive. Now, on the left, with the Everton at the bottom and the shield with the banner, this is their previous badge that lasted for a little while, and they tried to replace this with the one on the right, but this was another one where the fans would not accept it, where the fans revolted, and they ended up with a competition, and of the three, this is the one that was chosen. Which, if we just flick back again and you look at the one on the left with 1878 outside the shield and the banner underneath, you can see how this is kind of a redraw of that, and they've managed to fix the problems. They've managed to get all these elements on there and improve the scale and the proportion and the white space. There are some things that aren't quite, I think Everton being in that distinctive typeface is cool, that it's something different, but the type for the Latin motto on the banner really needs some craft to it. These little round edges and just the general style. It's a very straight S. The word is escaping me. The spine. There we go. The spine of the S comes across at like this really straight diagonal. It lacks a bit of elegance. So some marks off for that. But overall, it looks like a football badge, doesn't it? So decent. Nextly is their city rivals just across the park, Liverpool, and this crest came around in 1999, and they had some previous very rudimentary actually versions of this, and they tried to finesse it a little bit, and it looks like something from the late 90s, doesn't it, with all these gradients going on. We have the Shankly Gates at the top, the Eternal Flames, the Liver Bird, which is a symbol of the city, and all these things are very important to the fans, but there's just so much detail there, and that's not going to help this thing to reduce very well. And I think these gradients, as well as the detail, are making it look a bit dated, and the proportions don't really work very well. Now, they've been using simply the Liver Bird with LFC initials on the shirts, and I think this looks much better. I think for about the last 10 years they've been doing this, and if this was the crest, this would get a really high rating, but it's not. The official crest is still the whole shield with banners and the gates at the top, and there's just too much going on here, and someone needs to really get ruthless with the editing of this, which would be a brave decision to stare down football fans, but it would improve it. And I think they've kind of done that on the sly by just using the Liver Bird on the shirts. 54% for Liverpool. Across to their rivals, Manchester United, and again we have the Manchester Shield at the centre that we saw at the Manchester City badge, with the ship from the ship canal at the top, but instead of the rivers at the bottom, we have the Red Devil, which is the nickname of Man United. What works about this is it's quite a unique kind of shape. We've got a shield with banners, but usually it's a large shield with a banner underneath, but these banners are huge, and they frame it at the top and bottom with the footballs on either side, and it creates like a unique shape. Like if you were to turn this just into solid black, it would still be recognizable all over the world as Manchester United. Where did they get such a unique idea from? Oh dear, better not tell a Man United fan about that. So I would say this is appropriate because it's got the football, it's got those key symbols of Manchester United, of Manchester, of the Red Devil, and it's definitely distinctive because of that unique shape, and it's so recognizable now. But I think the creativity somewhat lacking, not just because it was copied from Liverpool, but I think there's better decisions that could have been made, and I don't think the craft is quite right. I don't like the type. I know they've used this kind of typeface for a long time that reads Manchester United, even when it used to read Manchester United at the top and Football Club on the bottom. Controversial change when they removed that, but from a design perspective they clearly did it so it would reduce better. In small sizes you'd still be able to read Manchester United, but the devil with a pitchfork, the proportions of that devil, the way it's drawn, that could really do with some finesse, and a skilled illustrator could improve on this. It's looking very dated with all these gradients and different styles, and particularly the type, and so only average this. The final shield with banner is Southampton, and this version was released in 1995, a redraw of one from the 1970s. And we have the club's nickname, the Saints, represented by the halo on top of the football, the scarf, and then within the shield, some elements that represent the local area. Now, this is appropriate in the sense that it brings elements that represent Southampton. However, I think overall the feeling doesn't have the aggression, the sense of competition that you want from a football team. It feels too soft, and it's not distinctive enough. Although the elements are distinctive, or particular I should say, to Southampton, overall we've got a shield with banners, a football, and it's rivers and trees aren't particular to at Southampton, although this maybe is the sea, and a white flower, that can be Yorkshire, not So it doesn't really work. The creative, yes, there's some good elements in there. The halo's pretty unique, but there's not a central idea that's come through. Again, it needs editing, and it is certainly not well crafted. I mean, look at that tree. It just looks like a splodge, and the style of illustration doesn't match the flower below it. Then we've got this football, which is very angular, and particularly the type is a mess. I mean, look at HAM at the bottom. We've got this A, which needs kerning properly, and just the way it comes above the cap height, and then the M is like nearly touching the banner, and then again above the tree and the scarf are nearly touching. And I could talk all day about the problems with the craft in this badge, and it's looking very dated. This is poor. Our next to last category is open emblems. Emblems because they're comprised of many elements, and open because there is no enclosing shape around them, so it creates kind of unique open shapes. So the first one is Crystal Palace, and this version was released in 2013. And for those that don't know, Crystal Palace are named after Crystal Palace, which was this building which was built for the Great Exhibition in London, which has since burned down. And this building is represented on the badge, and the fact that the building that the club's named after is represented there, as well as the club name, the nickname, the Eagles, and the football, it makes it definitely appropriate and particular to them. And it's distinctive because nobody else has that name or that building. And I applaud the creative because they've brought that through. The eagle is appropriately aggressive. They actually made it more aggressive recently. It was more of a naturalistic looking eagle. This could maybe be mistaken, or it's a certain type of eagle, but it has that sense of movement and strength coming through it. I'm not sure about it being timeless. I think maybe the type is looking a little bit dated, and it could be a little bit more refined, but overall it's a strong emblem. Next is Newcastle United, and I believe this is the longest serving, the oldest crest in its same format in the Premier League at the moment. This came about in 1988, and it's basically the coat of arms of the city of Newcastle, and it's not been changed that much. So for that reason, it is appropriate, but not enough to the football club. Not distinctive, because so many people have these coats of arms, animals surrounding a shield, a banner at the bottom. So low marks for creativity. Well crafted. There's some elements. Again, I think this type, it's not as bad as Southampton, but it definitely could be better. And look at the lion's face, all the detail is lost there. So we could definitely look at the sort of hands on these, are they seahorses? Do you call them hands? Fingers? There's elements where this could be crafted into something that was much more contemporary and worked better. I'd say it's relatively timeless in the sense that it's a coat of arms and it's the longest serving badge in the league, so it must be timeless to some degree, but I think this could do with a lot of improvement. Nottingham Forest have something really unique, designed in 1973. They've since added the 2 stars at the top, which represent their 2 European Cup triumphs. And originally, I saw when they added these, they put the stars at the bottom, which I think was just like a convention. But it makes so much more sense, doesn't it, that stars are in the sky, then the tree, and then the river at the bottom. And their ground actually sits right on the River Trent. So having this really unique name, Nottingham Forest, again, not a United, City, Rovers, Albion, there's only one, Forest. And that, ties in with the tree. So this immediately becomes something that's very, very recognisable. So it definitely gets points for being appropriate and distinctive. Although I said with Southampton, trees and rivers are everywhere. The fact the ground's right on the river, the fact that Forest is their name, it means that a tree's more appropriate to their badge. And I think adding the stars up in the sky, but also representing the cup wins, sort of bring that altogether. And look at that type. What do we think of that? That's some funky 70s type going on there. Some incredible detail there as that R leg sits under the E. And the only thing is this looking old-fashioned? I think right now it just kind of looks retro cool, and I love it. But you can see how it would date. So it's going to lose some marks for not being maybe as timeless as it could be. But overall, I think it's fun, and I like the core idea that comes through, and it's different to just another coat of arms. So good score for Forest. Tottenham Hotspur, and this iteration of the badge in 2006. Now, if you look at the badge on the shirt here, you can see they've used something very similar. Let me just flick back. Here's the current badge of the cockerel with Spurs stood on a football, and we see the same thing on the shot of Glenn Hoddle. Look, what do you think of that look? That is fashion. And he is looking over to Harry Hotspur, who is who the team are named after. And again, like Forest, Hotspurs is a really unique name, and you can see he's wearing his spurs there down by his ankles. But apparently he was a fan of cockfighting, which is why they have the cockerel with spurs on their emblem. Not maybe the best contemporary association. I don't think most people would be pro cockfighting these days. So it's something that's been there for so long. I can't see them changing it anytime soon. So it's appropriate in that it's such a unique name. I think it just loses some marks in that I just think there's something about it that just doesn't quite have the feel of a football team. I think it's even the colour. This looks maybe like it could be for a bank, a colour like that. And it's just the overall drawing. There's some elegance to it, but does it go too refined? It's definitely distinctive. You know, having a cockerel with spurs on is a pretty unique thing, and no one really has this combination, this sort of shape that's created by this open emblem. And I applaud them for keeping the simplicity of that. They have in the past incorporated all different elements into more complicated badges and shield designs, and I think the simplicity of this is better, and it's what we know by Tottenham Hotspur. It's well drawn. The only thing you can maybe complain about is this: does this really look like a football? I know it's supposed to be more of an antique football, but the proportion of it and this particular drawing, it maybe doesn't look like one. But overall, because of the craft and the simplicity, it is something that's timeless, and it is a very strong mark. And final category, there is only one badge. Our last badge is Wolverhampton Wanderers, the Wolf. And we have this very simplified rendering of a wolf head set in this hexagon shape, and it's the only badge as well as being the only one that's an icon. It's the only one that is presented in a hexagon enclosing shape. So these things definitely make it interesting and unique. And interestingly, when the club was rebranded just a few years ago, the agency, someone in London, chose not to change the symbol, the crest itself, but they actually used the shape of the ears and the eyes as inspiration for other branding elements. So you can see on this unique typeface that's been applied to merchandise and the type on the back of the players' shirts. They've used this shape, this triangle, as a little cutout to change the shape of counters or to just eat little parts out of the stems. And I think that's a really cool, unique solution, and it shows the strength of this icon. They've had a similar version for quite a few years, but this one was redrawn in 2002, and it is the best, and it's appropriate for the team, Wolves, and it has that feel of a sports team, of competition. It's definitely distinctive. We've said it's several features, even though it's so simple, that no other badge has. I love the creative direction that someone said, we are going to push forward with his simplicity. And there's a temptation to add Let's add the year of formation. Let's add something about the area. Let's add some banners. Let's add some type. No, we're going to stick to this central idea. And it's well crafted because it reduces so well. And I think it's something timeless because versions of this have been around for a long time, decades now. So it's getting a whopping 85%, which takes it top of the pops. So let's go back to the bottom. Getting relegated, I'm afraid, are Fulham, Southampton and Leeds, with Leicester and Newcastle just staying up. Then we've got a bunch of teams in mid-table mediocrity. Forest making the Europa Conference League. Arsenal and Crystal Palace the Europa League. Tottenham, Villa, Brentford into the Champions League. And Wolves claiming the title. I know for certain that you will not agree with this ranking. If I did this tomorrow, I don't think I'd agree with myself, but just let me know in the comments your number 1, the best, and number 20, the worst crest here. Have a go at creating your own emblems and discover that it's not as easy as it looks. Until next time, happy designing.